It is 6:04 PM, Thursday, June 19, 2025. I now call to order of the Station Area Task Force meeting. The first item we have is roll call. I do want to note that we had notifications from member Mayor Collins, Ondrasek, and Marinaro that will be out tonight. So. And now turn this over to staff for roll call.
Member Marinaro, absent. Member Collins, absent. Member Evans.
Present.
Member Ganesh.
Here.
Member Huff. Member Huynh. Member Lung.
Here.
Member Mayor. Absent. Member Ondrasek. Member Plain.
Here.
And Member Stockwell.
Here.
Thank you. So we look like we are down 5. Do we have a motion to excuse members Marinaro, Collins, Halt, Mayor, and Ondrasek?
Make a motion to excuse those members.
Thank you. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Thank you. Those who are in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstain? And that motion passes unanimous, 5 absence. Next item is declaration of staff procedures. Staff, please read the SATF meeting procedures into record.
Meetings are conducted by the chair in accordance with the following procedures. The chair of the SATF directs all activity during the meeting. Any item on this agenda may be continued to a subsequent meeting. Special procedures, time limits may be applied to any item as prescribed by the chair. Copies of the current agenda and any staff reports are available online on the Station Area Specific Plan website, as well as on the city clerk's website.
Thank you. And we'll now move to consent calendar.
The procedure for the consent calendar is as follows. Consent calendar items may be enacted or approved by one motion unless requested to be removed by anyone for discussion or explanation. We have one
item.
yeah.
Yeah, we have one item on the consent calendar tonight is the Station Area Task Force meeting minutes for April 17th, 2025. Is there a motion to approve the consent calendar?
Make a motion to approve.
Thank you. Do I have a second? And we have a second. Those who are in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstain? Thank you. That was unanimous. Motion passes. And we'll move on to general business. We have an item today. It is our Station Area Task Force review of preferred development alternatives for the station area specific plan. So I'm gonna turn this over to staff.
Thank you, Chair. So tonight, as you stated, we'll be having a presentation on the preferred alternative that's been developed through our meetings here with the task force, as well as the workshop that we held in May. So WRT will be providing the presentation, and then we'll have plenty of time for questions as well.
Welcome back, WRT.
All right, thank you so much, everyone. Hello, I'm Diksha Rawat from WRT. And our agenda for today is we're going to talk about the feedback that we received at the community workshop. And then based off of that, the preferred development concept that we worked on. Then we, based on the feedback that we received in the workshop, as well as in a lot of our conversations, we've also worked on an enhanced station plaza concept, so that we want to share that with you as well. And then beyond that, there is also an item of mixed use development on the Costco parcel that we wanted to talk about. Previously, we've talked about the LA project a number of times, so we wanted to do a little case study on that and talk about some applicability around that. And then we will have time for some questions and next steps on the project. So feedback on the virtual workshop that we had last month. It was a little bit of a mixed bag in terms of preferred concept. There was a lot of interest between residential priority as well as strategic growth mix. I think a lot of the interest around residential priority was to do with the large swath of green that we had. People were really attracted to that. But eventually, I think when we tallied the votes, the strategic growth mix had more people who voted for that one. And I think that had to, from the feedback that we received, it had to do with the presence of the Costco and using and making sure that that's still in place and in our vision for downtown. So these are some of the key community priorities that we heard. We've split them into the 3 categories. So first one, mobility and connectivity. El Camino Real was brought up a lot around safety issues and the need for safe pedestrian crossings. There were a few Santa Clara University students as well present during the workshop. And they talked about a lot of jaywalking across El Camino and the need for safer access to the Caltrain station. There were also comments around, do we want to have things like scramble crosswalks, taking inspiration from Japan, or do we want to think about like pedestrian bridges across El Camino Real? And then there was a desire to have separated bike lanes with maybe even trees similar to like an Octavia Boulevard. That was one of the resident images that we had shown. So people were reacting to that. There was a desire for increased last mile connectivity improvements. And then there was also a point brought up that at the Caltrain station right now, there is parking provided, and that also provides parking for the museum at the depot. And so we want to have some sort of parking also maintained through this process in that area. And the BART garage might be too far for those visitors. Then you just then Santa Clara station area students specifically talked about the need for safer cycling routes as an alternative, maybe looking at present day El Camino conditions. And they felt like Coleman might be too far for their use. So either thinking of improving El Camino or alternative routes to El Camino. And then people talked about bike lanes on Coleman, and but more importantly, also separating bikers from pedestrians. That was around mobility and connectivity. And then placemaking in public realm, we heard the need for shade in the station area. And that's something that we're going to address as we move forward in the next steps of the process, where we're talking about urban design and streetscape guideline creations. Then we heard the need for senior amenities in public spaces. And that was a request for restrooms near the transit train station right now. So those were some of the things we heard. And then in terms of district development and economic vitality, there was a lot of support for people who talked about having the Costco in the plan, but there was concern about their reluctance to changing locations or footprint. That was brought up by one of the members. And then retail users should not compete with the retail users that we might envision in the downtown area. And suggesting, some people suggested that the residential component at the top left end of the site, which is Reed Street and Dela Cruz, like, because we had shown them 2 options around industrial and residential. So they felt like we could complete the corridor along Coleman with residential, and that still felt close enough to the train station to have a residential use. and not have to be industrial. So those are the things that we heard from the community during the workshop. So then we took that and have come to the preferred development concept.
Well, I'm just going to briefly go over this. So we're really zeroing in to this preferred concept. This is going to look very familiar to all of you. I think the one thing I would add about the preference expressed by the community is I think they were compelled by what we call the residential priority concept just because of the parks configuration. I think that was very attractive, but because that conflicts with the maintaining the Costco in its current configuration, that wasn't possible to accommodate those parks. And so I think this was very much a practical choice from the community standpoint. But I think in our minds, it still has a lot of the public amenities that that we've all talked about that sort of enrich this district for for the new residents and workers that would be here. So you can see the main distinguishing feature of this scheme is that it really recognizes all of the pipeline projects, right? So those are all shown in tan. Those are all projects that have been submitted and are at some stage of review or approval by the city. So you can see along El Camino Real, there's a large housing block, and then near that, a townhome component along the Caltrain right-of-way. And then on the other side, we have the Costco, of course, in the northeast portion. And then further north across Coleman, there's another townhome project that is under review that has, that's pretty sufficiently advanced in the review process that's being shown as a pipeline project. And then a hotel project at the corner of Brokaw and Coleman that we're also showing as a pipeline project. So, placing all of those within context, but then still having, a lot of opportunity to expand housing at a fairly high density and really pushing that density up in the blocks close to the train station and along Brokaw. So bringing some of the tower elements into those blocks of housing, and then stepping down to sort of the typical mid-rise configuration as you get further north and east up into those more distant blocks. And that's a building type that we think has some traction in the market and in the developer community. And it's not unlike the buildings that are being developed at the Gateway Crossings. And then showing office space concentrated around the station for reasons that we've discussed in previous task force meetings. And then showing some of the parcels that have an opportunity to redevelop on the west side, closer to campus, showing some of those as additions to the campus program, and some of those as residential. But these are starting to step down a little bit in scale so that they fit more with the neighborhood scale. Utilizing the current VTA and city transit parking lot as a development site, but still maintaining it as important central public space. So that was definitely something that I think came out of this committee, but also had some appeal in our community workshop. And then really preserving clear to the north and east, preserving what is currently the light industrial district, showing that there could be some turnover and redevelopment there, but being consistent there as more of a workplace district, but expanding the range of allowable uses to include, innovation type uses, tech, prototyping, startup space, in addition to the light industrial that is currently allowed. So it's not changing, but it's adding to that a range of uses that could create this sort of innovation district. So that's really a summary of the preferred concept. And then I think if we just zoom in a couple of places. So this is looking down to the northward from Brokaw, looking north towards Costco, showing the park block here, which would be programmed, with lots of different types of recreation, which we'll talk about in a minute. And then sort of carving out a couple of corners of the Costco parking for these retail pods, which we think could be a nice way to integrate the Costco parcel with the new neighborhood. So seeing that right at the end of the park block, we think that could be done because in the reconfiguring of Dela Cruz and Coleman, we think that we could sort of swap out some of the space gained there to make up some of the loss of parking at Costco. So we think that this could be something that would be attractive to them. And then you can see the residential here along Coleman, the townhome project, as I mentioned before, and then coming up into some of the taller residential towers as you get closer to Brokaw. And then you'll recognize this diagram. You saw a version of this diagram. I think previously we were showing it as it related to the residential priority, which was the option 2, but now bringing this, the same concept of where are we concentrating the activation into the preferred concept. And so really focusing on the area right around the station as a node that has a lot of activated edges, both on the development site on the transit parking, but also across the street from that on El Camino Real. And then as you go to the other side on Brokaw, looking at activating all of the Brokaw frontage that we have, and the Gateway Crossings project does not have retail or activated space facing Brokaw, but they have it facing their central green. So we're simply recognizing, what they have in their current plan, and then taking that activation all the way up to the intersection of Brokaw and Coleman. So again, not trying to spread retail everywhere, but picking those places where it's most important to activate and create that commercial and social activity. And next.
So another important element for the plan area was to look at public spaces and make sure we're providing adequate but usable public spaces for the community. That was one of the things that the Parks team focused a lot on when we had conversations with the City Parks team. And so this is showing the network for public spaces within this preferred concept. And we did like a little study of sizing to compare whether these are usable spaces, which would be able to have active amenities as well as passive recreational capacity or not. So we'll go through two studies which look at a comparison for what Brokaw Neighborhood Park could accommodate, and one for what the linear park up north, which is creating a residential to industrial buffer, could accommodate. So this first one is looking at a neighborhood park. This area is roughly 500 feet by 150 feet, around 1.7 acres. So that falls based on the city standards into a neighborhood park category. This is just an example of comparing the scale of this park to the scale of Mission Bay Commons Park. So there are a few different configurations at the bottom that you can see and different ways of activating a space this size. The first one on the bottom left shows it activated with athletic fields. That might not be the best use that we're going for in this case. But as you move towards the ones on the right, we can see larger swaths of like open green spaces with activated edges on the two sides, or the one in the middle, which has a mix of activated spaces and other like green spaces as well. So this is just, and one of those examples, another one has a space for a community garden as well. So this is just to show, this is not to say what can happen on this one, but just to see like whether by the space provided, there are enough opportunities for public using it in a meaningful manner or not. This is the linear parkway up north. So this has a configuration of 850 feet by 100 feet. So because it's a narrow one, we wanted to look at this Nuevo Community Park, which is within Santa Clara and has a similar scale. So that community park has around 750 feet by 90 feet and has spaces like a basketball court, green open patches of grass. It also has a kids play area and just picnic benches for a shaded picnic area as well for the community. So just to see that something like this in terms of a linear parkway would be able to accommodate all of these spaces within the area that is provided.
So I think this is something that we've had a lot of discussion about, and I think we've sort of been refining this bit by bit each time we meet. And I think the first step, well, the last time we met, we were responding to comments about giving the historic resources their proper space and view corridors. So that's something that we're now showing in this design where the buildings are pushed back, they're stepped down in height and preserving, clear views into the historic train station, and also other historic resources. They've, the lookout tower and other infrastructure that are part of those historic operations in the parcel to the left. And then both recognizing this as an important public and civic space where a lot of different activities can happen, but also to utilize it and take advantage of its value as a development site. So just trying to accomplish both of those things. And then really looking at how this space can accommodate all of these different modes of mobility. This is no longer a, drive your car and park and get on the train, but it's about also the other ways of accessing the station as a pedestrian, as a bicycle rider, and as a transit user. And so looking at how those different functions interact with the plaza, and then also just taking to heart a lot of the comments, especially in our community meeting that we had prior to this, about just pedestrian safety, people feeling safe crossing El Camino Real, and then having access to cross the Caltrain tracks in a number of different ways. So we're still showing the overpass here. We're also showing the underpass at Benton Brokaw. And then what we're calling the scramble pedestrian intersections at Benton and El Camino Real and at the university entrance in El Camino Real. So just having, very clearly marked crosswalks, wide crosswalks, but also the ability to just stop traffic at these wider intersection spaces and allowing a scramble pedestrian crossing to happen. So just, trying to integrate all of those things into this station area plan. And then also accommodating the current well site. So this concept shows, a little pavilion that incorporates the well, but also puts a cafe space under that same canopy, something that could activate the plaza. Next slide. So this is really just taking each mode of mobility separately and showing how that might work, accessing in and around the station and across Caltrain to the BART station on the other side. So these are pedestrian movements. Next slide. These are bicycle movements. And what we're suggesting here is to really encourage bicycle movement. You want to make sure that you've got, all the protected bike lanes, both on Benton Brokaw, but also on El Camino Real, and that those can flow smoothly into the plaza space and access a bicycle garage. So we're actually proposing a portion of the underground parking for this parcel being dedicated to bicycle parking. It's something that you could, flow right into, just have a ramp that goes there. And then we've got these little vertical circulation pods on the plaza where you can come up from the bicycle parking or the car parking onto the plaza. This shows the the bicycle movements. And then the next one, these are the bus movements. So this is starting to anticipate that buses could use the new Benton Brokaw connection. That would be an alternative route that instead of going all the way up to the De La Cruz overcrossing and then all the way back down Coleman, buses could go directly from Benton. They could cross on the Benton Brokaw underpass, have a stop at the BART, or they could turn onto El Camino Real and into the bus loop in the transit plaza. So what we're showing here now is essentially the very similar bus transfer and stopping that you have now in that parking area. I think we've added a third side on the north edge, but the side of the plaza next to Caltrain and the side on the south leg are very similar to what you have today. So this is just looking at an expanded network of those bus movements and then integrating in the bus function onto the Benton Brokaw corridor. Now, I guess, well, go to the next slide. I think we put all these together and it looks like a jumble. And I think the point that we want to make here as part of this plan is not that we're solving all this, because this is all a very detailed study in itself in terms of how you accommodate all these movements. But I think what we want to say strongly in the plan that each of these modes is accommodated, in its own right, and that we're sort of paying equal attention to bike as we are to cars, equal attention to pedestrian as we are to transit. So. And then this is just a little diagram showing the possibility of either one or two levels of underground parking. So, and then there would be a strategy that would need to be developed in terms of how is that parking assigned, right? Is it all public and you're simply replacing the parking that is on the surface lot now? Is a portion of it dedicated to the commercial office building? You wouldn't have to provide any parking to the commercial office because it's directly adjacent to transit, but a developer might choose to provide some level of parking for that. And then what's the split between commercial office parking, public parking, and then how much of that is dedicated to bicycle parking? And that may be something that initially you could start with a small amount, but as bicycle usership grows, for people using transit, that might be something that you expand in the future. So this is just showing a couple of those ideas. And then these are just some photographs of other similar scaled plazas, transit plazas. So you can see it's a real place for civic gathering, for different activities to happen. You could have, markets here, you could have events. Everyday use could be just a great place to hang out, sit in the shade, get a coffee, while you're waiting for your train to come. And then you can see on the lower right here, this canopy, similar to what we're showing in the station plaza, that could cover the cafe space, but also integrate the existing well into that structure. And then these are just showing, that we were wanting to accommodate all of these modes. So in the lower center, let those pedestrian crossings be really well marked. Something that's very generous, have the ability to have the scramble crossing times. The lower right, these dedicated ramps that can just easily flow bicycles in and out of a bicycle parking facility. Above that, bus bays with nice bus shelters, making it very attractive to use the bus system. The center top is the vertical circulation from the parking below up into the plaza level, et cetera. TNC drop off, kiss and ride drop off. We think if you back up a couple, we think that could be that zone. Go back another one. Yeah, exactly. So that blue band that you see could be the place for kiss and ride and TNC pick up and drop off. So yeah, just considering all of those different functions.
The last piece we wanted, go ahead.
Is it good to give comments on some of the earlier stuff before we go into the Costco, or should we hold comments to the end?
Either way.
Just go through and then,
Okay, we'll hold.
yeah.
Okay.
I got a list of stuff to jot down too, so.
A shorter portion as it is. We just wanted to do like a quick case study of the Costco option in general. So this is our existing Costco site. This is the precedent that we looked at. This is the mixed-use Costco development in LA. As you can see, so we looked at the details of the project. It's around 800 units with 184 low-income affordable units. It's a 5-acre lot with a development height of around 77 feet. There are 5 levels of subterranean parking on this site to accommodate both the Costco use as well as the units. That is something that would be tricky in our area in general because the water table is pretty high and we're very close to the bay. So we can't go that, we might not be able to go that deep. And then 5 levels of residential development on top. And then the ground floor is completely occupied by Costco. This site was previously not having a Costco. So this was a hospital site which is being developed, and the Costco is coming in as a new tenant within this area. So we did model it just to compare how that works in 3D and spatially, and how something like that would fit within our site. So you can see the ground floor Costco and the residential on top. And so then we sort of took it up to our site and sort of placed it on. If it was exactly on our site, it's pretty much the footprint of our Costco. And there is no way to have the existing Costco and this new development on the site happening at the same time. So this is just an iteration which is showing the old Costco going away and a new like mixed use development in place of that. We thought it would be helpful as something, if something was to redevelop on the site, to take it closer to Coleman to create sort of a street frontage and bring the surface parking at the rear side of it.
You
And-
could, and we didn't try to develop this site plan too much. I mean, we literally just plunked this model on the site just to sort of show, you know,
Yeah.
the size of it. But I think there could be some interesting ways to, you know, utilize the surface parking so that you don't need to build all that underground parking that like the LA project is doing. You could have the main entrance to Costco on this side, right, on the inside of the block, but you could have the residential address on Coleman. So there might be a nice way to sort of separate those uses in that way. And as Lucia said, sort of let the residential sort of define the edge of Coleman, you know, so that it matches the residential on the other side.
And so then we did check in with our economic subconsultant on the possibility of something like this happening, because it would be very tricky, obviously, to have them like go out of their business while the construction is going on. What they shared was we won't rule it out entirely as something that's not possible at all. There might be a slight possibility that something like this could come about if the markets improve in a few years. So it's not something that we should like take off the books completely, but it's not very realistic in the near term at this point. We did.
Just to add to that, I think what, you know, we were a little skeptical about, you know, how would this make sense to Costco, right? They would have to completely shut down their current operation and then have the period of business interruption in order to develop this new site. So we talked to our economist about that. And, you know, her position was that it's not an impossible situation for a company like Costco that has, you know, hundreds of locations, and to interrupt business in one of their locations in order to rebuild that as a more successful model could be something that they would be interested in. And they simply absorb the loss of business during that redevelopment time as part of their cost of doing business overall. So it's sort of amortized over their whole business. So, you know, her recommendation was to not rule this out as something that could be attractive to Costco in the future.
Just 2 more slides and then we can dive into discussions. I can see a lot of questions overall. But we just wanted to look at what other precedents there might be. I did not find one where like an existing redeveloped. I think there was a Safeway example where it redeveloped, but it was more of like more retail within the same area. So not really like a residential on top. This is one in Portland where the Safeway was across the street, and then the Safeway approached developers and they did this like new model where the Safeway occupies the ground floor and then there is residential on top. This had 2 levels of subterranean parking and 5 levels of residential on top. And then these are just just to say that more and more like grocery stores are doing things like this with like Whole Foods having like these mixed use buildings that it's in now. This one's in Oakland, and then Trader Joe's also being in like mixed use buildings with residential on top. The other one is in Berkeley. So things for us to consider overall. But now we can take questions.
Why don't we do this by section? Because I think like if for every one of them, we each have like some questions. Why don't we can move the deck like all the way back to like each of the sections, and I would just call whoever has questions on each one of them. If you don't mind, just moving the deck all the way. Thank you.
Any questions on the workshop and feedback that we heard? Go ahead.
So, feedback from community, I think. No, it's good that we
Yeah.
had that.
Go ahead.
Yeah.
Okay. Moving on from that. Any questions on the preferred concept?
Yeah, a couple of questions. Number one is, I guess we have that giant brown colored building that's right on El Camino next to the plaza.
Mhm.
Like, is that a project that's under construction or entitled, or what's that?
It's under review.
Review, got it. And secondly, I wonder like what the height limits would be like in this case. Are they not fully decided yet, or would they generally be around like 12 to 15 stories?
So the highest that we have here is 13 stories, and that was after reviewing the height limits based on the current ground elevation and the allowable based on the airline
Airport.
paths. Right?
Yeah.
So 13 stories roughly is what we would able to get through that process, which also takes us to, after the seven to 8 story model, the next financially feasible like development prototype,
Yeah.
around 12 to 13.
Yeah, I mean, generally it's between 7 and 12. It's not feasible. You either need to go above 12 or under 7, but I guess that makes sense. And finally, I noticed for the location of the parks, right? You have those 2 rectangular parks that are connected by the corners. I wonder if there's any reason why we did not like move the park up 1 block so that the 2 parks are contiguous. Like, was it so that we can surround the park by residential on all sides, or?
Are you talking about the 2 parks like these 2 across?
Yeah, these 2
the street?
parks. Yeah.
Yeah, so the park would have gotten very close to Coleman.
Yeah.
And we didn't feel like that would be the ideal conditions for public to enjoy the park space in a like safe manner or just like comfortable manner, being next to a high-speed corridor, which is why we sort of pulled it inside.
Makes sense. And yeah, a couple more small questions. The residential areas, would they allow ground floor retail everywhere? Like, would we have like a mixed use zoning everywhere, or?
Yes. So the idea is the retail map that we showed you.
Yeah.
This is about the areas that we would want to think about retail being required, like activated frontages being required.
Yeah.
In the other areas, they would be allowed, not required.
Okay.
So in case someone wants to, yes.
Okay, perfect. Yeah. And I guess industrial area would be no residential, only commercial, right? Because it's buffer from the airport. And finally, the office zones would allow mixed office residential buildings, right? Like I know San Francisco has some of them, like 10-story building with like office on the base, housing above.
Yeah, I think that would be allowed. I mean, office would be allowed everywhere.
Yeah,
and
of course.
residential would be allowed everywhere. So I think what we're showing here is a sort of a suggested arrangement that puts, the classic office nearest the station. But to actually mix the 2 together in a project is certainly something
Okay.
that a developer could propose, and that would be allowed.
Oh,
Yeah.
so it makes sense. I guess the zoning we're keeping liberal in this case. It's just what we've showed here are generally where different uses will be located, but we're keeping the zoning flexible, right?
Correct,
Perfect. Love that.
correct. Yeah.
Okay, so I have a couple of questions. First comment, I noticed on is it the plan, I guess, if you go back to what is it, just the regular, kind of overview. So down in the lower left corner there, there's an area that's, I noticed is academic buildings, and there's like a residential across from the Benton. What I think is missing is like, there's the Women's Adobe Club is there, which is a historic Adobe that's preserved. So I feel like that's missing because like, I don't think we'd want that to go away or get rezoned. And there's also risks about developing that close. I know they have foundation concerns in the past, even when the Benton was being built
Mhm.
and when the university was building their new center there as well. So we should factor that into that part of the plan. Let's see. The answer to that question. So one thing I was a little concerned about is like, I do recognize that there's a couple projects, the TAN things that are in development. But, I know two of them have a lot of townhomes, and that's really kind of woefully underutilizing the area. And it's kind of unfortunate that that's, the way it's going with economics for those particular parcels. So even though they're in development, is there a way that we could allow the higher density use? If I recognize townhomes are very unlikely to redevelop, but is there a way we can at least allow that should somebody decide to change their mind in the future? Because
Absolutely.
I know some of these folks, they're probably going through the entitlement process, and they maybe just are already going through it, so they don't want to like wait for us. But if we can give them that option in the future, if they haven't started, then they have that option to do something different if that's.
Yes,
that's what they want.
absolutely. And
Okay.
next time we come, we'll bring like a plan version of like an allowable heights diagram.
Okay.
So we could talk through that, but yes, we will allow for like a higher
Okay,
intensity.
so we
of
could have an
development.
overlay or something, so
if-
if those projects don't get immediately built.
Yes.
They still have the option to come and do the higher density. That'd be very good. Okay. Station, okay, hold that one for later. Okay, I think all the rest of my questions are on the later sections, so.
Okay.
Thanks.
One just quick comment on, I don't think we're really identifying hotels or hospitality in this, at least in the legend. I know there's that corner parcel on Coleman and Brokaw that is a hotel, and I believe there's one in Gateway Crossings as well. So just, it could be helpful to think about where are those located in proximity to
Mhm.
parks and the transit and the airport, all those things might be helpful conceptually to look at.
Yeah,
Especially existing. And I think those would be, that would be an allowable use probably anywhere. There could be a hotel near the station, there could be a hotel up in that northern residential area. So I think that could be an allowable use. But then also it's good to show for context. Already.
Yeah, I think his point is like on the Gateway Crossing on the top right, like the L shape, that's actually slated to be a hotel.
yeah. So this one and then like this tan color one that we've shown as a pipeline
Yes.
project, that's also entitled as a hotel.
Yep.
Okay,
One,
any other?
just one small thing to comment about the airport height restrictions. I know you said 13 stories is what you can get, but generally the FAA will allow you as tall as you really push them. So if you really want, you could probably go until like 300 feet above sea level, which would be like what, 27 stories or something. You could do that if you really wanted, but yeah, you'll have to like ask the FAA, talk to them. I know San Jose was able to do this, so.
Yeah, so I think that's like more of a city conversation, I think. So based on the data available to me, based on the maps that I am able to see, that's the height limit that we can, but we'll definitely discuss it further with the city and see if there's scope to change any of that.
And I think that's an interesting idea, especially as you come into the station, the office area itself. If you could somehow get an exception and have some, landmark hours there, that I think that would be positive for the plan.
You guys have anything before I say so?
Next sector,
Um,
next section? No.
No, soon. Yeah, I was gonna double tap on the women's Adobe. I'll be remiss if I don't say anything as the Chelsea commissioner. I noticed like you did slate the one in the parking the one building as an office. I know that is a VTA parcel, and I was wondering if that was going to collide with their playbook, because I know they're housing focused on their own parcels.
Good point. They have seen it and haven't raised an objection as of now, but we will double check with them. I think the conversation we had with them was to have some sort of, to allow for development on that parcel, but we didn't specifically have them object to the office building yet, but we will double check with them and see what their thoughts are around it.
Yeah, I don't want that to be a surprise because they own that parcel. So
Yeah.
that would be a surface land act, yeah,
We might have to be a residential building.
depending on, yeah, which agency deals with it, yeah.
Maybe it could be like that mixed use office, residential typology of building in some way. Good point.
Awesome.
Okay.
Comments we have on that one, but yeah, the same thing about the in pipeline, I would love to see like a bigger envelope for those guys. Yeah.
Next section, station.
I just thought of one more question. I noticed the industrial, you had a couple buildings that were showing higher. Is that just because we don't expect that area to redevelop, or we just don't want to include any changes in the plan, or?
Yes, so I think we showed the two buildings just going higher, that we would allow for a slightly higher intensity if someone wants to redevelop within the zone. But we weren't sure if like everything would turn around, which is why we showed like minimal like changes.
Okay.
But the allowable
But the
would-
zoning would allow it, that whole area.
Would
you're just-
allow
you're just-
for, like,
the turnaround might
the
be
whole area.
unlikely. Okay. that makes
Yeah,
sense.
and I think what we were trying to show there is that there could be a mix of, preserved existing uses with some infill, but yeah, redevelopment would be allowed in the entire zone.
Okay, so that whole area could turn into that purple, but it's very unlikely, which is why you just showed a couple. Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
thanks.
Exactly.
Is R&D type of uses included in that?
Yes.
Oh. So with regards to the station area, are we there? Okay. So two things that obviously catch my eye is the 13-story building that's directly across from the depot, which is not stair-stepped in any way leading up to it. And it really kind of shadows, the afternoon sun will definitely shadow the station and the platform partially. The other thing is obviously there's a lot of parking that's disappeared for the depot area. There is parking directly in front of the depot and then down to the south where the pedestrian overcrossing is now. There's quite a bit of parking down there. What is the plan to handle the parking, the existing parking? And is that building a must-have in that configuration?
I think the
So parking first. So this is showing parking replaced, with up to 2 subterranean levels. So if you see those 2 layers there, they wrap around in an L. So there's 2
Mhm.
levels directly underneath the building, and then it wraps around 2 levels underneath the plaza. None where the well is. So that's why that quadrant is left.
That's the other thing. A 13-story building is going to have a substantial footprint going down below to support it. How does that affect the well as well?
So based on our
No pun intended.
conversations until now, with our infrastructure consultant, he said that it shouldn't be an issue. And VTA had conducted some studies previously when they were looking at redeveloping this parcel, and it also felt like it was not going to be too much of a problem to develop around the well.
And then it was also brought up earlier with regards to developing space directly next to a historic structure, how that impacts its foundation.
I don't think it will impact the foundation of the train station building, but we can definitely go back to our infrastructure consultant and talk about that.
You're talking about if they have to drive piles
They're driving piles and
for
such.
the new
yes.
building, even though it's across the street you know, I think that would certainly be a consideration that would need to be looked at in the development feasibility. Yeah.
Okay, I realize none of this is in stone yet. This is all conceptual, but
Yeah.
just.
Yeah.
But VTA did express an interest that they would like to be able to develop their site, and in their long-term land bank, they had been considering this as like a site that they would put development on.
So is that property VTA property there? Is that the VTA property that we were discussing earlier?
VTA and city.
City.
And city?
So the parking lot is partially owned by the city and partially owned by VTA.
If you remember
Agreed.
the parcel map, like where the building sits, majority of that is VTA and then the L shape is city owned. Like on the plaza around.
Where we've shown the building right now is roughly the VTA
Oh,
part of the parcel.
Yeah, so I have a couple of questions. So I guess number one, the drop-off
Oh, are
loop,
you done?
Okay, yeah. So the drop-off loop, I'm guessing it'll be just 2 lanes, one for buses, one for cars, with, I guess, turnouts for both buses and cars to drop off people, right? Would that be the design?
Yeah, it's two-way traffic.
Oh, 2-way. Okay,
Two-way traffic. The buses and cars share
okay,
the lanes, but buses have pull-offs. So
Okay.
any bus that stops, it happens in a pull-off.
okay, makes sense. And I guess there's no bike lanes on that street. I guess the cyclists can just use the plaza or something around it, right? Or,
That's a really good question. You know, we started delving into that level of detail, and I think there's a number of ways you could do that. But yeah, now we're sort of showing that as something that could happen in the plaza itself.
okay, and I guess the underpass under Benton, it'll have a pretty steep gradient, but will that be for general traffic or only for transit, bikes and pedestrians?
I think that will have to be developed
Okay.
as like that study goes in based on like what comes up in terms of feasibility in that study. But ideally, we would want to prioritize bike and transit traffic as much as possible. But if it's possible to have general traffic go through, I think that would be allowed based on the feasibility study that happens around it. But I think the station area plans purview would be to recommend transit first and then general traffic after.
Okay, and,
Definitely protected bike lanes. That's
okay, of course.
priority, definitely transit.
Yes.
And then, you know, as far as cars, I think there's been sort of a range of ideas discussed in this committee, ranging from, you know, let it be mixed mode, but since it is mixed, everyone is sort of traveling in a calmer,
Yeah.
slower speeds versus, a dedicated transit. So I think as Deeksha says, that would need to be borne out in a more detailed study.
Okay, and I guess the parking garage, I'm guessing it'll be owned by the city and you'll have the entrances like where the office building is, right?
Correct. That's what we're showing now, is that the entrance is on the backside where you see the dash lines starting, both for the bicycle entrance and the car entrance side by side, but not mixed.
Yeah, of
So
course.
those would need to
Yeah.
be separated.
Yeah, I guess, and I'm guessing most likely it'll just be a public parking garage with like parking by the hour. That seems like the most likely case, right? Maybe a portion of it can be reserved for car share or for the offices, but I have a feeling it's most likely just going to be generic, like pay by the hour parking garage for people visiting this area. So
Likely, yeah.
How are you guys thinking about parking ratios for the office space and public space? And how much is Caltrain and BART ridership going to play into that when you're thinking through how much parking does each of these buildings need on like a ratio basis?
So, I mean, to kick us off, like firstly, like this is a transit stop, and by like AB 2097, none of these builders are required to build any parking. So parking will not be able to be required in this area as a result of that. But by having a lot
Or
of,
dedicated to the to the commercial office.
commercial and
Not
residential.
required. But
I mean, it can't be
None.
required, but
none required.
but a lot of-
However, a developer
market factors.
might want to put parking just to make the space more marketable. But since it's a site that's owned by the city and VTA and is likely to be some sort of a public-private partnership, then both of those agencies are going to have something to say about how much parking is dedicated to public versus to the developable use. So it's, it's going to be sort of a process that determines that equation.
But what I will say, just for like the overarching area itself, which is like within half a mile of the transit station, where in conversations with a lot of developers, we've definitely heard that within the South Bay market, they still, depending on where they're located, still provide some level of parking. So it's not really, for market rate units, they're not really going like zero parking, but maybe like a 1-to-1 ratio or like slightly lesser than that, 0.8, 0.7. Just depends on the area that we're located in. So completely up to like them having marketable products out there.
Go ahead.
Yes, have you talked to VT about how construction will affect the bus routes? I know the 22 and the 522 both key routes that go on El Camino, they run and stop by that area. So how will, during the construction period for this, how will riders be impacted? Will VTA move this? Where will VTA move the station, and will there be delays to service?
That's a little beyond the scope of this project at this point. This is very much like a planning endeavor. So we're not really into like the nitty-gritty of like the actual construction or whether this project, a building like this would even come about. This is just to say that we think that this would be like a good option and we would provide that on this parcel, this type of development would be allowed in terms of height and allowable use. And then at the time when VTA or the city feel like this is something that they would want to like embark on, they would work through between themselves and maybe with the developer on like the actual logistics of the project and how staging for transit might happen in the process.
But I think the goal of VTA would be to not have any interruption in service. So either, the
El Camino
construction,
route.
yeah, maybe they have to move anything that's on the interior loop now. Maybe they would bring out to El Camino, as an interim measure, but all that would need to be worked out so that they could maintain the level of service.
So in looking at this, the one thing that it seems like when we originally stepped into this, one of the things that we were trying to keep was in honoring the historical side of the area with the college, the mission, the depot, and moving on in towards downtown. And I just don't see anything that's really honoring that. All we're doing is working around the historic things and really not incorporating them into the area. It seems more like we're just working around them.
I guess I want to add something like what he said. I think a good compromise for that would be designing the infrastructure on the station plaza to be in Mission Revival or some other historic architecture style.
Yeah.
The pedestrian overpass, that office building, possibly the cafe that's also shielding the water well, maybe some other elements of the plaza. We could design that all in Mission Revival just to like honor the area, while everything else will be like unrestricted, built modern, however we want.
I'll say exactly the opposite. Please do not put mission style outside of the university.
So I wanted to come back to Michael's question and just address that directly. So I think we're trying to do exactly what you're suggesting, that this plaza is like the forecourt to the historic station. We were, you might recall in past iterations, we were developing this entire block. And I think we were also having taller volumes next to the station. And I think with your feedback, we have created this very clear plaza space to honor the depot. And that is contiguous with the Mission footprint across the street, that is marked at the end of the Franklin corridor. So in a sense, that all is a zone that is, whose express purpose is to honor those, existing cultural resources. It's not its only purpose, because I think, this is going to become a very intensively used area. And the depot station is sitting right in the middle of something that it's going to be a major Bay Area hub of transit and activity. And accordingly, I think we want a lot of other functions to be able to happen. We want this space to be activated, right? And so I think, if the depot retains the museum there, that could be a good activating use, or maybe that is something that would be modified in the future. Maybe it's something even more active than a museum, but certainly in these other building ground floors, that one step back space that you see on the tower that says activation, we're thinking of that as like a roof terrace for, like a restaurant space that overlooks the plaza. The ground floors of all of these buildings, we think could be activating uses. So this wants to be a very vibrant, active space, but also honoring these cultural resources. So we're trying to sort of maintain that balance.
Right. I understand that. I appreciate that. And obviously I understand that the openness, and that's to not just completely dwarf the depot. I guess right now where I'm stuck, and that's just, is I see square buildings,
Yes,
square cold buildings. And it's like, where in the design, which I understand can be changed and it can be brought up, but it's hard to conceptualize that when I just see a big building.
yes, at
Fair.
like this
Fair enough.
specific plan stage, since we're usually at like blocky buildings and not really like showing like great architecture. I think as maybe the city would go on to like the form-based code side of things, that's where like more of that character could come into play. What we would also look into in the next stage of our work as we're developing urban design and streetscape guidelines would be to think maybe of like interpretive art, etc., which could inhabit the plaza space that could tell some of that story, and really like bring in that history as people are like walking through those corridors as well. So we'll work on that. And when we come back to you next, we can think of that within our public spaces as well.
A couple of,
I appreciate the comment about the blockiness. I think it's very fair comment. So let us work on that a little bit more. Yeah. Sorry.
couple
go
of
ahead.
small things. Number one, are there any plans to put anything above the BART station? It's just a 1 or 2 story structure. You could easily put offices, residential parking garages, anything above the BART station.
Above, meaning west of that?
No, I meant like directly
or
above.
on top?
On
of it?
top, yeah.
Well, right now, it's planned as a multi-story garage.
Okay,
But that is also in question. BART is looking at feasibility. They're re-examining this project, and there is some sort of value engineering
Budget cut.
studies going on. So, are you thinking of some?
I can give you some context because I've been
Yeah.
talking to VTA quite a bit about this over the last several
Okay.
years. And so VTA's and as part of the BART station has been very resistant to building housing on top of the yard and the garage. They are explicitly not planning for it at the moment. They're especially within the design that you show here, which is with the garage. It's been suggested to them and they've said, we don't want to even consider it. because of feasibility of how they're building the New Hall yard, because it is a maintenance yard. Most of that you don't see is maintenance yard down there. I will say that they are rethinking their plans. As Jim has pointed out, they are currently, I think, rethinking whether they're going to build the parking structure as part of the initial design, as part of their de-scoping for funding reasons. So that right now might be a lot of surface parking, which does mean that if they don't build something there, there's a chance that, you know, we have an opportunity to build over the parking lots or whatever in the future when that redevelops. But that's something we really have to go and push VTA on. So that's something I've certainly been suggesting them for quite some time, but they've been pretty resistant. So
Yeah.
background.
I mean, yeah, if VTA decides to actually allow development, I guess a good mix would be like, yeah, put some parking, maybe a couple of towers, could be office or residential. The rest of the space could actually be an open space on top of the parking garage. It would be like just a really nice mixed use development. If you've seen, I think Atlantic Park in Paris, where they built this gigantic park on top of a train station where they also have housing on top. That would be like a nice mix. And second thing would be, what's the plan for the train station? Will it become a museum or retail space, or will it continue being used as a train station? What's the plan there?
The historic depot.
Yeah, the historic depot.
Michael, would you like to respond to
The
that?
historic depot is, we've just, we're in the process of finishing up another 10-year lease with Caltrain and JPP. It is a historic.
Yeah.
So it's an historic structure and it has a museum in it. So the plan is to continue being a museum. Yes.
Better be.
Yeah.
So appreciate like the opening up to the space, like in the front. I did note the parking underneath. Not a deal breaker, but I do want to note that it is part of the footprint of the third mission. So when El Camino rerouted, like right there was an archaeological dig on there already, and they have found stuff like under there. So I just want to make you aware.
On the parking lot site.
Mhm.
Okay.
On the
If that
parking lot side.
happens, nothing will get built there. And that's
know.
like a.
Yeah, so there
in the
is
future.
finding there, there's reporting on like what's actually under there. So, yep.
Okay, I have a couple comments about the station. I do want to say I appreciate what you're doing with the pedestrian overpass. I think that is a good way to connect the Paseo at Gateway Crossing to the other side. I think that's something that when the BART station got configured the way it was, you kind of lost that connection. So I think that I appreciate that. And I think that's a great connection point for pedestrians and to get people, you know, connect the two sides there. One question I had was about parking. I know you mentioned that like there's no requirement for the buildings, but is there a way to encourage some of these other buildings to put public parking in for the station, or is that probably challenging for private developers to do that, given that there's no?
Sorry, one more time.
Is there a way to encourage the private developers to put public parking in for like the train station, or is that really hard because it's transit located, so there's not like a public benefit that they would want to get by putting public parking, like density bonus or something? I don't know.
That's actually an interesting point because I know Caltrain actually leases the space like that on the city-owned lot. So there is an economic benefit for private owners, like if they're around and not having Caltrain to lease it because they're producing spaces.
And then one other area where you might be able to get some public parking is, you know, the building on the other side of Broca, that's the city police station right now. So I assume that's city owned. And so maybe that if that does redevelop, that would be an opportunity to get some of the public parking there as well. If the plaza doesn't work out, because I do like the plaza that you have with the parking. It's a great idea, but I don't know what that.
Have you done a study? Have you talked to Union Pacific? Oh, I'm sorry.
I was just going to say, it is city BTA property, so you could negotiate when you develop that property to replace parking,
Yeah, that one makes sense
Yeah.
too, but like I thought that.
but for the benefit of the depot as well.
Okay.
Yeah,
That sounds good.
for sure.
But with the police station side, I think that was the second one being mentioned when we did, if and ever that redevelops, that's also city owned. So that could also have some parking that comes in through that.
Cool. So I don't know, Mike, did you have a question first? I'll let you go.
I was just curious about the pedestrian overpass, if there's any chance to move it further south where there's another opening. And which, first off, two things. If you were to move it further south, you'd create another way to get into the, possibly onto the platform too. So there would be two ways. Right now, there's only one way to get onto the Caltrain platform. If you were to move it further south, there's a potential for two entrances to the Caltrain platform as well.
The only issue with going further south is that we actually go into the maintenance yard area, and that won't be possible through the BART space.
Yeah. I
There
mean,
is already like a
it's,
question mark on this current overpass, and there will have to be conversations around like whether something can go over, which like overlooks the maintenance yard as well.
I think it's a good comment. I mean, we're trying to do a lot of things with the positioning of that. We're trying to give the depot building some space. So we've sort of scooted it a little bit south for that, but we're also trying to keep it aligned with the linear green coming down from Gateway Crossings. Do we have a little bit more leeway to go south? I think maybe. So I think that's something we could look at.
Yeah, we also have to look at like private property versus public property. So as we're going in, like we are going into like the hotel property that comes about. So the feasibility of that
Right.
might get impacted further. So we'll go back and we'll check on the drawing board whether there is an option to scoot it further or not. And if there is, we'll try to move it a little more.
Yeah, and that was a discussion point like in the previous meeting too that I had brought up because it was really close to the depot. And I'm like, if there's gonna be an overpass over there, like it needs to be as invisible as possible. so,
Yeah,
Like it doesn't impact.
we
it.
had a conversation about having like a lightweight typology of like bridge structure with like maybe transparency in the railing so that it inhibits as less as possible.
I had a couple more questions. One was about your pedestrian / bike flow. So I noticed Broca has the underpass. I think like as somebody who has biked quite a bit, like I've actually, for better or worse, I went that underpass by Lafayette before, if you've ever gone under that. And that is terrifying as a cyclist because you get boxed in, even if you take the whole lane, you get boxed in by the walls. So, dedicated bike lanes, I think I'm a little concerned about like as a bicyclist, would I want to even go through there if you opened it to general traffic, right? If it's buses, like you're not competing with buses all the time and, that might not be so bad, but whereas it's open to general traffic, I'm a little afraid about the wideness. Like you have enough
Yeah,
space. to
let
feel
me bring
safe,
up.
given that there's walls, because like you can't bail, right? If there's a wall there.
Yeah, let me.
We've also looked
Yeah.
at a level grade separation.
Okay,
right?
so it's harder.
Pedestrian and bike they would need less
elevated.
clearance than the buses and,
Okay.
trucks and whatnot. So there's sort of an elevated, it's like a terrace on.
Okay, so there's more of a grade. It's not like just like the bollards or something. You actually have a little more separation.
It's about
Yeah.
the same
Yeah.
as
Okay.
Palo Alto.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay, that's good because like it's
Yeah.
some of those are
yeah, we'll try to have it at
scary,
an
yeah.
upper level than.
Palo Alto is narrow. I got hit by a bike a couple of times, like walking over there, but at least it's separated.
okay. You won't be hit by a car, which is I guess good. Awesome. Yeah, I think that was my last question. Yeah, thanks.
I think we can move to the next section.
Okay.
Oh, I also want to say I like those scrambles, by the way. Crossing El Camino is scary, so I appreciate what you did.
If you want a good example of a Costco development, Google up Costco Santa Fe, Mexico. They literally put a huge sports complex on top of a Costco. It's absolutely wonderful to see. And if you look at what a lot of Asian malls look like, they don't just put like 5 or 6-story buildings. They put like legit high rises on top of malls. And I mean, we don't know what the feasibility will be right now, but I'm pretty sure 10 years down the line, this will become a feasible site to develop. I imagine towers on top of the Costco with like open spaces in between the towers on the Costco. That seems like a model that would work out over here. So.
So the question I have about this is, why don't you just move Costco across the street and build a new Costco across the street? And then put those buildings on this side. It puts them closer to transit.
Yes, we had a conversation with the city around that, and we were thinking about alternative sites that could be possible to do that when ultimately Costco is I mean, it'll depend on the property owner, whether they are willing to do something like that or not. And is there any incentive for them? It'll be about like a developer coming in, talking to them about like buying maybe that property and Costco then wanting to redevelop on a different site. So on our end, we can put in the levers of like allowing for taller heights that a developer might be enticed to want to do a project like that and hence offer Costco enough benefit to try and move a cash flowing Costco right now. So yeah, as Suvir was saying, like with time, as like our development feasibility changes, because currently it's a little challenging, as it changes and evolves, and we go back into a phase where construction costs change or things become a little more feasible again, that could be a possibility. And that's why we were looking at sort of like a 15-year timeline for the Costco site to redevelop.
And one thing, those red retail buildings, I guess those will just be like quick temporary structures, right? While the Costco can't be developed, you can at least like take away a portion of the parking lot adjacent to the park and just put up like a basic, easy to build retail building that can be torn down in a few years, right?
Mhm.
Could be. Those could be like a pop-up,
Yeah.
pop-up retail. They could be permanent, it could be like a small box retail, on those corners. We're,
With rooftop, rooftop space for something.
could be, yeah.
I think a food garden would be a good idea where you have like a bunch of pop-up retail spaces like around the courtyard and you just put up some nice trees, some nice artificial turf and just make it like an outdoor food garden.
Mhm.
I guess I had a couple of questions about the Costco. It's a great idea. I think it's a great idea. I do recognize that the feasibility of it's probably pretty hard just because getting Costco to redevelop is, I agree with all your statements there. So I'd love to see it, but, have to cross my fingers that would happen. There's a site, I know Michael had suggested the site across. I assume that could also be possible on the site on the south side next to whatever I don't know what that tank is, but there's some empty space there.
Those are city facilities.
Okay.
Yep.
Yes, that's like electric substation and things like that. So
Okay.
that would be a little tricky, I think.
Okay, so not on the tank itself, but those two parcels next to it. I believe that's also Apple's building, which has its own set of challenges. Okay, and then the last question I had is actually, have we reached out to Costco? Do you think they have any interest in redeveloping in general, or is it more of a speculation?
We have not reached out to Costco. I don't know if the city has in any way.
Do we have a way to
They were invited to our property owner meeting, but.
Oh, we showed
no,
up.
no, yeah. no.
Okay.
So I think what we're trying to do is just build flexibility into the plan. Think about how could they, redevelop if they so desired, but not preclude other possibilities. I think, Michael, your idea of why wouldn't they go across the street? I think that would make sense. But what would have to happen is that somebody would need to aggregate a bunch of parcels, like a broker, and then maybe approach Costco and say, hey, I've got an idea and maybe I could connect you with a developer and then we could sort of do this swap. And I think something like that, could happen. It would take somebody taking some initiative to sort of push that along. So I think, our plan shouldn't preclude that possibility. Like we shouldn't maybe have that as a residential only. I mean, it's not being proposed as residential only, but we may want to consider opening up the allowable uses on that north side to commercial, to regional commercial.
So one thing that I think that I'm a little worried about within this area is that depending on how this gets, done or zoned, Costco might decide, hey, it's more money just to sell the property and build an apartment complex or condos or whatever, and they just close it down, right? And I think, I'm sure, sounds like from the community feedback you got is I'm sure a lot of folks were concerned about that, or right, they really want to see that stay. I mean, I personally, it's Costco I go to, it's the one I like to go to, so I don't want to lose that's convenient to my house. I don't have to drive all the way down to Sunnyvale or whatever. And so I guess what are the risks there, like of just them going up, deciding to go home? Like I know, like we lost our theme park is going to go away because somebody bought it, right? To just build, I don't know, a warehouse or something. So that's my biggest worry is like, what if we do this and like it's so valuable now as residential? Costco just like, yeah, it's too much hassle to come back in 5 years or whatever it takes to tear it down, close shop, and they go home.
They could choose to do that. And I think that would be unfortunate for the city because it's a great retail resource, but it's also a great tax revenue for the city. But I think the foil to that is that we're allowing, these other uses. So that would free this up for mixed use redevelopment, and that would not be a bad thing.
Yeah. Is there some way to like try to encourage a requirement for real, similar amounts of retail or something that like just discourage like just oh yeah, we're just going to shut the whole thing down, but like, encourage something like this to happen, like our actual redevelopment with retail. Unfortunately, it would be sad if Costco went, but even if something else could move in there, right? To replace them, that's
We
similar.
could look at
sales
like
tax revenue.
community like density bonus for like community benefits of like providing like a certain type of like use or something like that.
Okay.
To like encourage grocery stores or
Okay,
things
because I
like
think we
that
should try to
within,
do
like, the
something because like
policy.
the one thing I am a little worried about too is like as you go to all this residential, effectively it really hurts income for the city because you really need sales tax, the Prop 13 and all that kind of prevents
Yeah.
residential from paying off given the amount of services it takes. So how do we keep that so we don't just suddenly
Yeah, another thing we could think about as we like move further into the plan is, do we want like, even if we like don't make buildings like office only, residential only, commercial only, do we want to think of some sort of like use caps or like ratios so that then when new developments are coming, we want to make sure that a certain typology of ratio is maintained within the station area. And that's something we could discuss in subsequent iteration.
Yeah, are there things we can do there? Or I guess the other thing I'm worried about is like, I know the state's been passing a lot of laws around development near stations and stuff that may prevent you from
There's another
doing
one
things, and so I
in
guess that's the
play,
other
and let's
concern.
see how that turns out. So that
I think there's a
will
recent one too
impact
that's going right now.
some of our that might streamline some of our ability because it's within half a mile of a train station that they're looking at streamlining housing approval processes, etc.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember the name of it, but there's a recent bill on that. I think that's the one we're referring to.
Yeah.
And they did say something in there about if you have a plan that you can override some of that, but I don't know if what we're doing counts under that new bill as a
Yeah.
station development plan or whatever. So
We did build this into the downtown precise plan because the idea there is that we wanted a mixed use district, right? We wanted to encourage office and residential. So if it became all residential, that would not be a good thing, then we wouldn't have any of the worker population that was desired, nor would we want it to become all office development. So we set caps for each. And then that's something that's, monitored by the city, periodically to see, where they are in the build out. So that's something we did right into the downtown precise plan.
yeah, maybe in the future we could talk about what we're doing, how that goes with, I guess it's like SB 79, I think is the one that's
Yeah.
currently
I think
going on. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I saw that and it scared me just because it's like, sounds like
Okay, one thing about
everything we would be doing may be in vain. Yeah, go
Yeah,
ahead.
one thing about SB 79, the bill has so many strings attached. It's been watered down like crazy. I'm just going to tell you right off the bat, I've observed California housing bills for the last like 4 or 5 years. even SB 79, it's not going to have much impact. Like there's just too many strings attached, too many poison pills in every single one of these bills. I really don't think it's going to result in much new housing. And I don't think it's going to affect what we're doing in the station area either much.
Yeah, I did see there's something called the transit-oriented development alternative plan. So I don't know if that changes some of the provisions. So anyway, it'd be interesting to understand what we're doing and how it interacts with that.
Yeah. Let's see. All in flux. Any other questions, or we did have a question for you? Okay, so, oh, you have a question?
For the,
This one?
yeah, I noticed that you cite some precedent. Did you also look into the local precedent of the one that was used to be in downtown San Jose on Second and San Fernando?
No, I haven't done like a full case study on like the different typologies. This was a very famous one, which is why it did, our economic sub-consultant like suggested we just look at it, but we can look further into that one as well. Downtown San Jose.
Is it a safe way?
Yeah.
It was a Safeway, yeah.
Okay, so for our question, we've been talking to the other WRT team, which is working on the citywide park system plan. And one of the elements that did come up that they wanted us to think about potentially if there was a site to place within the station area plan that they're looking for is an indoor rec center with a gym. That's something that has arisen as one of the needs within the city. And if we do this much residential development, it might be like a good amenity for the public if we could site it within this zone.
I guess my question would be like, how much space will it require? Like proportional to the kind of parklands that we're looking at?
Probably be like 1 acre, right? I mean, a couple of basketball courts, swimming pool, it's not that big.
I think like visually.
I think, I'm trying to remember. So the aquatic center in Mountain View would roughly be smaller than this like green space that we have right now. So maybe like three quarters or half of that space. Yeah.
I imagine the best place for that would be like near that linear park in the industrial area, right? I guess that's where land's also the cheapest. You can just acquire a parcel and put it there, right?
The thing with such amenities, which are very regional in nature, is that you also want them to have good access in terms of like siting them on one of the major streets, so that community members are able to like come to it easily. If you tuck it further inland, then maybe it becomes hidden and might not be the best location.
Is this a community center or a business?
Community center, like city-owned indoor rec center.
I mean, even the corner of the industrial area, I think it's only like a 10-minute walk from the station. So like, it's not a very big place, right? So even if you put the rec center at the edge of the industrial area, it is going to be pretty accessible from everywhere else.
I mean, things like a rec center,
Yeah.
you would expect most people to drive to in this region.
Yeah.
So I think space for like parking as well for that. So which corner of the industrial are you mentioning?
Yeah, so I guess where Coleman intersects Broca, it's kind of like in this region, it's close enough to that linear park as well. And I guess it's pretty accessible by foot. And if people want to drive there, you could just put an underground parking garage. I mean, anything's an option at this point, so.
Any other suggestions?
Where's the nearest existing site already in the city?
Good question. Is there like a gym? Because I feel like there are indoor rec, but not a gym from what I heard.
There's a senior center, but it's Only seniors, obviously.
Age restricted.
Yeah.
Like the senior center is like down the street. But I don't think we have an indoor rec.
I think that like a gym is not
I mean, there's.
present, or maybe
Center.
just one
Right.
other.
There's a
So do
teen
you want
center.
it
Yeah,
on the
we-
other
We
side?
have a senior center and a teen center, but
Or
we don't
you're
we don't
like
have
other
a.
side.
Do you want it on the other side of the train tracks, or you want it more centrally located so that you can
Mm.
feed both sides of the community?
So maybe like part of the police station parcel on the other side?
You know, that's actually might be a good idea, the police station parcel, because then that would be a good place to put more public parking, because it could be dual use rec center and public parking for the train, right? And so that's some synergy there. That's actually a
Right.
good suggestion.
Yeah, and I think we have to remember, like, the police station parcel is not just a building, it's actually a lot of space.
It's a lot, yeah.
Lot of like,
Huge
it
lot.
actually is like this
Yeah.
entire.
Maybe that could be
space. Maybe like one
multimodal.
side here, like the area like a little away from the train station, that part of the parcel.
I mean, and that's probably good for rec center. I was gonna say like, putting on like I'm on the library board and like putting on a hat, like it'd be great to have a way to have library services. But like, I know we have Mission Library just on this side, but something on the other side of the tracks, because there is always a little barrier there. And
Mhm.
combining that with a rec center, but that would mean that we'd want to put it somewhere on the other side or near one of the parks or something. And the problem is I don't really see a good access space, right? You'd almost want on the corner of like Coleman and Brokaw, something like that, because it has easy access, but
The point is like, if
Yeah,
you're,
we're
you're
both
you're thinking about the PD parcel, right? That's close enough to the access to the other side.
yeah, it's easier for the other side people to like walk over to it. And then the people coming from the rest of the community would actually have easier time driving, because it's generally hard to drive over to that side. I mean, as much as
Mhm.
going to Costco, it's getting over there is the biggest pain, right? So it is a good suggestion on that side. But
Okay, we can take these suggestions back to the parks team. Not to say that it will end up getting cited here, but we can like suggest these as like possible location ideas, and then they'll see based on the larger.
Couple more small ideas I want to suggest. Could a portion of one of the parks actually be a hardscape plaza? Just because it's adjacent to retail, I think that would just one of the parks, if maybe a quarter of it is,
Yes, the green is just to represent
Yeah,
park space, but
okay.
don't think of it as like everything is green
okay, makes sense. Yeah,
lawn.
I guess some of it could be a plaza. And then I know another idea, one of the other members brought up was some performing venue. I know that's more of a stretch, but if maybe a portion of the industrial area could be reserved for that, maybe a small like performing center, it could even be an outdoor one could be built. But yeah, it really depends on financial feasibility, what the tax revenue is and all that.
So what we could do within this plan is to like allow and encourage a use of
Yeah.
that sort, and let's see if there are any like levers to do that.
Yeah, I mean, most likely it'll be the city like offering to pay a developer to construct something like that. So
Let us see.
yeah.
Okay.
I had one more suggestion on the rec center. I had mentioned there's the historic Adobe, and I think you had shown like educational buildings, maybe that block. And then there could be a joint thing with maybe even Santa Clara University or something to
Mhm.
open it up. I mean, want to be city, but maybe it's kind of convenient to the university too. So there's, across from the Benton there. So maybe that one of those sites.
I mean, the
as
first
well.
block
You the first-
on El Camino, right?
Yeah, like either the first or second block in El Camino there. That might be a good spot.
Right by
Kind of
Franklin
opposite.
and El Camino.
Unfortunately, the city doesn't own the land. That's the convenient part about the police station is the city has the land.
There's a lot of houses over there still.
That is a
I think
downside. yeah.
University own a good part of those.
Yes.
I mean, it's a partnership or something.
Okay, that is all we had for you today. But in terms of next steps, since now we have the preferred concept, we will start working on traffic and circulation analysis based on the preferred concept, as well as infrastructure analysis in terms of like whether the current infrastructure is adequate to support this level of density. And the next time we come to you, we would have worked on developing urban design streetscape open space standards. I think Rebecca had shared sort of like a schedule of like what we're coming to you with next, and that one's the next one. And after that, we'll come with the infrastructure and then the traffic analysis. The traffic analysis would be last because that's going to take a few months to go through.
Thank you. So right now, if there's no other member comments, I will open this up to the public comments. I don't see any members of the public like in person. So if there's any members of the public that are online that would like to comment on this item, please raise your hand. I do see one hand. So Eric, please go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. My name is Eric Morley with the Morley Brothers on behalf of Bixby Capital Management, the owner of 495 El Camino, the retail corner at Franklin and El Camino. And we don't have any current plans and plan to retain that retail in the near term, but did want to ask that both the staff and a consultant team and task force consider a flexible zoning or designation as it relates to that site that would encourage either residential or office or a combination thereof. And as part of the program, but then also as part of the CEQA evaluation, because of the importance of that corner, we want to ensure it has the maximum opportunity for early and iconic development, and so want to be able to respond to market conditions. Also understand the retail objectives of that corner, and then last, just wanted to probably have just a separate or follow-up meeting with the consultant team and professional staff as to the plaza designation for a portion of that site as to the kind of area and use. And look forward to collaborating and coordinating with the staff and the consultant team and the task force. And also just want to thank you all for your work to date. So thank you.
Thank you for your comments. I actually, just for clarification, you mentioned it's 495. That's the building with the Starbucks in it?
That is correct. Yeah, Starbucks. It's the retail building at the corner. It's Starbucks, B of A, and then a couple of vacant retail bays as well. Yeah.
So it's 495 and 485. So it's that square.
Correct. Exactly. Yeah, the L. Yeah.
Cool. Thank you.
Yeah, you bet. Thank you.
And I think that's all the hands we have. And that's the end of that item. Thank you. The next portion we have is public presentations. So this is the part where if anybody has anything that's not on the agenda, you may comment on that. Yeah, raise it with the committee. I don't see any hands, so I think we're done with that as well. And I think we're on to staff report.
So, given the number of absences tonight, I wanted to just do a quick check of everyone's availability for the July 17th meeting. And of course, I'll check with those that are absent tonight as well. Does anyone know that they're definitely not going to be available that evening? We're good?
Too many windows. I'm trying to find my calendar.
Okay.
Probably good.
Okay.
It's 4. Yeah.
We'll have a quorum. Okay. Thank you.
And I do have one item, just an announcement that we're having our El Camino Real specific plan study session for the council on Tuesday, the 24th, if you're interested. It'll be online or here in the council chambers. Tuesday, the 24th, this coming Tuesday. We'll be presenting the revisions that we made per their direction from the last time we saw them, which was in 2022.
So the study session is at a 7 p.m. start time or is it
It
earlier?
is a 7 p.m. start time. I do believe we'll be going under public hearing. Not sure where we are on the agenda, though.
Yeah, are there any other announcements, other items that we need to be aware of? That's about it. Cool. There's no objections and is there a motion to adjourn tonight's meeting to the next regular scheduled meeting on July 17th?
Motion to adjourn?
Thank you. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you. And those who are in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Abstain? Unanimous, and we're adjourned. Thank you very much, everyone. Thanks, guys.